What's poppin', gamers? Welcome back to Beach Gen Game Club with our next episode on a major Beach Gen console game. This time we're tackling the Xbox. We already finished not finished, but like we already covered quintessential big Dreamcast, GameCube, PS2 games, and now we're talking about Phantom Dust for the Xbox.
You the one that brought us here?
You've no memory at all, is that right? Just an image of some ancient ruins.
But how did you know that?
We are all lost souls.
This place is like the lost and found counter at a catastrophe discount store.
We are very short-handed, especially when it comes to people with skills.
Why don't you tell us what happened?
Now, your reaction to this might be, okay, what the fuck is Phantom Dust? You may have never heard of this game, very likely. I do think it's had some buzz since around 2014 for various reasons. We're going to talk about that. It's definitely not the first game you think of when trying to name quintessential Xbox titles. I think, I guess with Beach Gen, and maybe Alan, you can add on to this, there's sort of this tension between, okay, we sort of want to be comprehensive and cover the big milestones, but then also we just want to play games that are new to us and that are maybe a little bit under-discussed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like this was such a prolific era. It was before like the big HD boom of games that killed like a bunch of studios and kind of generally slowed down game output on consoles for a little while. And so there's really just like dozens and dozens and dozens of cult classics on all of these systems. And I know I didn't really know that the Xbox had very many. I'm kind of a Japanese gamer guy. I don't play many Western games. And this isn't a Western game, but yeah, I hadn't heard of Phantom Dust even before these nerds started talking about it.
Yeah, we were sort of jokingly throwing around that, okay, the more obvious thing to go with would be Ninja Gaiden, fucking Halo Combat Evolved, right? Maybe you can throw this in. Pang had a whole arc where he was ranting against Halo Combat Evolved, and then the other day he was like, actually, maybe it'd be a good idea to play this, yeah. He's not here today, unfortunately, because he had some other commitments, but he'll be next time. He'll be there next time. I'm sort of curious about his takes. So Phantom Dust, I think in general, it has a weird dev history. It definitely has the very obvious, underappreciated, overlooked cult classic kind of vibe and aesthetic to it. And I felt like because of that, the actual experience of playing it now as a newcomer is sort of under-discussed. We have a nice, healthy round today, so I'm really interested to see how everybody has been getting on with it. We've all been playing, we've all played at least a couple hours at this point. But yeah, the first thing we're going to talk about is the game's dev history. Phantom Dust was directed by Yukio Futatsugi, who you may know from this little series called Panzer Dragoon, which I guess in its own right is kind of a cult classic, underappreciated, not that widely played series. Do we have some Panzer Dragoon fans in here?
Oh, hell yeah. Game's awesome.
Yeah, Orta is like one of my favorite games.
Orta's so sick, dude. Oh my god. Yeah. I haven't played 1 and 2 in a minute. It's been a little while. I've actually played Saga. I think Panzer Dragoon Saga actually is, I think kind of like Phantom Dust. It also has this sort of meme status. Oh my god, it's that game on eBay that's like $500, right? And that's why people know about it. And they, because it's so inaccessible, that raises the desire to kind of play it. And I felt that way for a long time as well. And I have played it, and it's pretty good. I want an opportunity, sometime in the future, where I can really explain why Panzer Dragoon Saga is sort of overrated. but still pretty good and worth playing. Yeah, this is another story for another time. Yeah. So Futetsugi, after the death of the Saturn and the just again how financially badly everything was doing at the time, he leaves Sega. He works at Konami for a bit. I think he actually works at a couple different studios, but like mostly Konami. We were talking about in the pre-show. He made this, or he worked on this game called Ring of Red. That's an SRPG, which made Alan perk up really hard. It has pretty cool box art.
Yeah.
But none of us have played it. Maybe that is a PS2 game. Maybe that is for future Beach Gen.
Next time.
And then he joins Microsoft, and I've been doing some research about this. So basically, Microsoft, they had this office in Tokyo. They refer to this as Microsoft Game Studios Japan. When you look at the Moby Games page, for example, for FanDust, or even on the box art, on Wikipedia, whatever, it will always say Microsoft Game Studios as the developer, but that doesn't tell you a lot, right? From what we could gather is that this office, this arrangement really existed to only make 2 games for the original Xbox. The first one being this also Japan exclusive game called Magatama. I think, John, you said like Futetsugi also had some involvement with that.
It's very, very short. Like it was saying that he was there for a couple months and then was able to like successfully pitch Phantom Dust to the higher ups and then just started working on that.
Yeah.
So, maybe this is like special thanks territory.
Yeah, maybe I'll try to give that a play before the next session and report back. It looked sort of slow and weird. Yeah, and then they made Phantom Dust. They got the opportunity to make it. And then this office, this team, just kind of dissolved. Futetsugi stayed at Microsoft and went to a managerial role. Again, it's very, very, very odd in the sense that Phantom Dust just feels like this thing that came out of nowhere, and you can't really pin it to a solid, like well-known studio or anything. It's just this temporary arrangement of people. Again, from what I saw in the credits, people from Konami, people from Square. And again, the vibe that I got was that it was sort of intended that way. Even it wasn't intended to be a long-term arrangement. Very strange. It just makes information about this game even more scarce and even harder to come by. Yeah, and another thing that you can learn when you try to research this game is that Futetsugi, apparently he was playing a ton of Magic the Gathering at the time. He was very fascinated with card games. And yes, Phantom Dust is a real-time 3D action game, but with a card game backbone. All your abilities are sort of modeled after trading card game sensibilities. You draw them from a deck. We're going to talk about that as we go. And the vibe is that back then, during development, Microsoft Game Studios America was also playtesting it, and the game was actually really popular from what I could gather in playtests and just at both of those offices. But then very suddenly, the Western release of Phantom Dust that was planned, the game was already fully localized into English. So when you get the Japanese version of the original Xbox copy now, you can also play in English. The Western release just got canceled. Microsoft did not intend to release it in America or in Europe. It never actually came out in Europe. And then it was picked up by Majesco. I think Raph, you added a note in our little notes thing that the same thing happened to Psychonaut.
Well, that's not me. I see with John.
Oh, who was that? Oh, sorry, I felt like a Raph thing to that. Yeah. John, do you know more about that?
No, it was just I think there was at some point Microsoft was looking at fucking Voodoo Vince and Psychonauts, and they said we will publish. We see a lot of potential in the Voodoo Vince brand, and they left it like Psychonauts to the wind, and then I think
That's so
Majesco ended
funny.
up publishing that.
I'm sorry, Phil Spencer's such a biased motherfucker. Like, he's always going on about how Voodoo Vince is like his favorite game. Like, what is this propaganda?
It's awesome.
So this Majesco release is also really weird and interesting in its own right. They released it for $19.99 back in the day, and I think it was a very low print run of only 50,000 copies. And the vibe that I always got, is that this made the game, like, probably this print run okay, ran out really fast, and then everybody who had it, they really fell in love with this game. And I guess I can tie this in to the first time that I heard about it, because, yeah, like I said, this game never released in Europe. So I had not heard about it until 2014, I think, I hope, when Microsoft announced that they were rebooting or just making a new Phantom Dust game for the Xbox One at the time. They had a big E3 CGI trailer. It was attached to the studio called, I want to say, Dark Side or something.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cam. Yeah. Yeah. And then around this time is when I first realized, oh, there's all these weird Phantom Dust fans who've loved this game for years and who've been shouting about it from the rooftops. We in our Discord, we shared this video from Austin Walker from formerly Waypoint, who are now defunct. Where he was like talking about the game for 2.5 minutes, and again giving the same spiel about, oh, it's this misunderstood, overlooked classic and super weird, has a crazy twist, super tactical, whatever. Yeah, and that's the fact that this original game, because it had such a low print run, maybe I should have mentioned earlier, was very inaccessible. I think copies were insanely expensive at the time. And obviously Xbox Live, the original Xbox Live, was defunct, so you couldn't really play it in its originally intended form. It was a very multiplayer-focused game. So that made the idea of some kind of new thing, a reboot, whatever, really appealing. But then, maybe if you recall, Microsoft, they were struggling really hard to get anything out the door. Scalebound, Fable Legends, fucking Crackdown 3. And then Phantom Dust was another one of those games that got the axe. And then finally, as sort of an apology, I feel like, they did a 2017 remaster of the original Xbox game with a couple subtle changes. The remaster was developed by Code Mystics, and it was released for free on Windows and Xbox, which is pretty cool. I think, Raph, you played this remaster like around when it came out, right?
Yeah, because the other big Xbox game, Forza Horizon 3, was non-functional. I
Oh.
was like, well, this works, I guess.
That's some great marketing.
Brilliant marketing. I liked it. I didn't understand it very much, but I liked the vibes. It was fun, if a little too long. I was too scared to play much multiplayer, so my experience was mostly biased towards that single player experience.
What's this fucking word that Gerard Lee from Korea Gaming explained? Like, it's a gumu game. It's like the Korean word for like a poisonous, toxic, like just body of water. So like a game like Street Fighter Third Strike, for example, that's that, because it's only played by old, scary boomers, and getting into it is like a trial by fire.
Yeah, because the water's stale, right? It's been sitting there for forever.
Yeah, everything that, yeah, exactly. Like, everything that lives in this water, has gotten used to it, but everyone who, like, tries to take the plunge now, they'll just get fucking cooked.
I think we would say sweaty game.
Yeah, but that's not as intellectual,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Discord fighter.
So fucking true, yeah. So I'm assuming this this remaster is the version we've all been playing, right, for this exercise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I wanna eventually go grab some footage of the original Xbox version, send it to John for the edit, and then maybe see if there's any differences. I know, or what exactly the differences are. Maybe some stuff that hasn't been carefully reported on. I think there's supposed to be some changes between, or sorry, basically the way it works. There's a hard split between the single player and the multiplayer. To unlock certain functions in the multiplayer, you have to play at least like 3 chapters of the single player, which took me 2.5 hours. That's the point where you unlock the ability to make your own decks. And I think in the remaster, they get you into that a little bit faster. There's this quick play option that just assigns you random decks, and I think John and I, John, you told me yesterday that, or Hot Pocket, I think it was you, maybe you told me that those decks seem to be based on decks that were like shared around on forums and stuff years ago.
It was a specific person. There's a page on Phantom Dusted on archive.org that's basically like, oh yeah, this specific person made these decks and these are what's in the game in the quick match.
Yeah, that we didn't super carefully verify it, but it seems like that suggests, okay, this was probably not how it was in the original, right? In the original, you probably had to make a deck before you could actually start playing. And I think from that perspective, that makes the remaster pretty appealing, right? You don't have to go through the grind of the single player that we'll talk about to have any kind of fun with this game. I guess, like, yeah, now we're at the crucial question. How is it to get into this game? Obviously, when people talk about it, they, again, when they mention, oh, it's underrated classic, well, I've said that like 5 million times now, but it's always also obviously attached to this idea, okay, it looks very, stylized, has a very, I hate being reductive and like maybe sort of low-key racist when I say this, but it has a very Japanese aesthetic to it, right? Do y'all have thoughts on like the character design, the vibes? Maybe Alan, you're our premier vibes gamer.
Yeah, so when I look at this, there's lots of elements of like what was like contemporary at the time. Tetsuya Nomura kind of reset the Japanese video game aesthetic world around the time FF7 came out. Zippers were coming into, and all of his stuff is inspired by streetwear culture at the time. I mentioned a little bit pre-show. The zippers as trim on these outfits is an immaculate design choice. Something I could only a genius could have come up with. I didn't know anything about this game, and I saw Japanese influence, but I thought this game was Western because it kind of has this goopy vibe. I don't know how to. You look at the character designs and you're like, you see Matrix in them, which I guess was inspired by anime too. But
the guy you play as is the dumbest looking motherfucker of all time. He has the dumbest face. I love it.
I did want to bring up the whole Magic the Gathering kind of hit the Japanese game dev world like crack in the 80s, around the late 90s. And so there's like a lot of that in this PS2 era. You got stuff like Bot and Kaitos on the GameCube. You got a bunch of weird Japan only PS2 games. It's funny that Magic as like this like it's the big Western card game ended up being the one that was super influential on all these games to me, because the 2 other biggest card games in the world are Japanese in origin, but they don't seem to have the kind of influence on their own aesthetic, I guess. It's interesting.
Hot Pocket, you played Magic for a good amount of time, right?
Yeah, I played quite a bit of it.
Do you have like did you have like maybe expectations about this game sort of based on that?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of you can definitely see like there's a lot of sort of magic-y type things in it. Like the way the aura particle system works is sort of like lands and magic, where you have basically you have cards that are dedicated to being resources that let you use your other cards, but the ratio isn't fixed. So like you could have a deck that had maybe like really a bunch of really cheap cards, and that lets it so that you don't have to use as many of the aura particles. So that way you'll be able to have more cards that actually do things more often versus like when I was watching you and John play, like some of the times you'd get like 2 aura particles and it's like okay, you know. But then you don't get as powerful of a skill if you are relying on using cheap stuff. So that's a very Magic the Gathering dynamic. That's a really common thing. There's just a lot of I can see a lot of similarities and like influences. Although there's a bunch of weird stuff too that isn't really analogous.
Futatsugi seems like generally a guy with pretty wide eclectic influences. I know when I was reading up on Panzer Dragoon Saga's development, for example, people would often refer to it or the studio Team Andromeda as like this punk developer, right? Yeah, I mean, Panzer Dragoon specifically had so many influences from like French artists and this weird made-up language and all that stuff. Maybe John, do you have thoughts on, because you're a big fan of Panzer Dragoon, did you have like expectations sort of about or for Phantom Dust on an aesthetic, vibe, thematic level, maybe?
I know that he's actually said there's some stuff that he likes. Like there's some ending stuff I don't want to talk about, but he's like he kind of notes like the way like I know Saga ends and the way this ends. He feels are sort of similar. Like it speaks to stuff that he likes.
Okay.
And I think that one of the things that really struck me when I finally played Panzer Dragoon was the fact that it's a very simple game with this amazing like world around it. And I think like on a macro level, I think Phantom Dust feels like it's a similar thing where it has all these aesthetic influences and it has all this design and trends it's pulling from. But on a really basic level, it's like this is a game where you run around as a goofy looking / cool looking guy and you throw fireballs and then you hit something and like half the level breaks. And it's like it's a very smart game that like kind of satisfies you on a really basic level.
Yeah. I feel like Panzer Dragoon is a very terse series in general. Maybe outside of like except for Saga maybe. And then this game is immediately a lot more chatty. Which
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely doesn't have this like super, this is gonna sound really stupid, but like this sacred artistic fucking masterpiece I overlooked for so many years vibe instantly, right? It just feels like random Japanese game that you picked up like from the fucking bargain bin, right? Which I mean that in the most endearing way possible, right? But
well, in some ways, I think that's good because it means that, like, especially talking about now, it's less like precious. I know with Saga, you were kind of being, diplomatic about how what you felt about that game, and I think with Phantom Dust, there's not the reverence around. Well, there is a community around it, but you're right. It's not something where you go like, oh, I can't besmirch the good name of Phantom Dust.
Exactly. Like it feels very unpretentious. When you get into it, and that's not to say that Panzer Dragoon is pretentious by comparison. It just has like, I think it's carried out in the localization and the translation as well, right? It's a pretty, it's a much more obviously goofy game in that way compared to something like Panzer Dragoon. I don't really have like any good examples, but maybe we can play some English voice acting clips to substantiate the point.
I hope to never see you on the surface again. For both our sakes. And for his.
Stop! Don't go after her! I told you before. You'll lose your memory again. If you stay on the surface too long, we've been out too long already. We must go back underground.
It's pretty, like, it's not, there's nothing in it that's insanely memeably bad. But it definitely it has that vibe. You know, it has that vibe. We're vibes gamers.
Yeah. I think another influence, I don't know if like anyone's ever asked Futatsuki in an interview, but I can see like mainly in the underground hub and it kind of bleeds into the narrative too, where about it feels like it's got like a Blade Runner cyberpunkish influence and aesthetic to it. And there's parts of the narrative that kind of remind me of it too, and I don't know how some of the characters talk, not in cutscenes, but like when you just talk to them in the hub world. I don't know when we're gonna get into story stuff, so I'll save that for later.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
I can see it with the like the neon and all that.
The music too, like the music is like a mix of like you got like some parts you have these modern electronic beats, and then next thing you know you're in a menu and Mozart's playing.
It's so sick, dude. The music is low key, really, like really special. It's actually really cool. So I guess, yeah, we talked a little bit about the onboarding process of this game. Like I said, there's the single player and the multiplayer. I think most of us, I mean, let's not make a big, let's not make a big secret about it. Obviously, when you try to play multiplayer, it's a fucking wasteland. Just like the story of this game, right? The game is set in this post-apocalypse where nobody can go to surface, and you know, the same is true with the multiplayer. You try to go to the surface and there's fucking nobody there, right? So the single player is your most convenient option in that way. And I think I already mentioned, yeah, to get to chapter 3, at which point you can finally start building your own deck. That took me 2.5 hours. And yeah, I think for me, I was carried by our favorite word, the vibe, and also the fact that I could see, okay, these mechanics that we're going to talk about in more detail in a sec, I could see even like in this context, okay, this probably has merit in a multiplayer setting. But it's really hard to get around the fact that, okay, this campaign is just bot matches. You're just playing on the same maps of the multiplayer mode. And you're playing with, you know, mostly symmetrical AI, and it's sort of lame.
Yeah, I'm past the halfway point, and it's gotten a lot better. I don't know if it's all the way good. But the more time that I put into the single player campaign, and especially the multiplayer, like I think the worse it makes like those opening hours look. Because it's like it isn't just that it's bot matches. It is bots that like are teaching you like the wrong lessons. Like there's an ability you'll get early on called Bullet of Fire, and it's this dead simple. It's a fireball projectile. It tracks the enemy a little bit, and it's really boring to use. It's very functional. But you can just go into matches, and it's like, okay, we need you to go do this, or here's a new kind of card type, and it's like, okay, I don't give a shit. I can just use Bullet of Fire and slowly chip away at these enemies that can't really respond. And there's a lot of like defensive mechanics that make the game really interesting, where it's like if you attack somebody, you know, thoughtlessly, they can make it. There's like a bunch of different things they can do, where they can destroy the ability that you attack them with, or they can freeze you can make it so you can't move. And none of that. It's like it's not even like a fighting game bot match. It's like a fighting game bot match where the enemy couldn't defend and couldn't move and could only do like jabs or something. If you were just sit it, you know, it isn't even like you have to think about positioning or anything. It's like this. It's I think for me it was like there's a split in the campaign between this is teaching you something, which is sort of like maybe a necessary evil for a game that's this weird and coming out of a time where there's maybe not the same infrastructure. So I kind of get that. There are a few missions that I think are pretty good. There's one I think you were coming up to, is the Guy and Sisters where you're like the one. It's a 1v3, and they have a really interesting loadout you have to kind of consider, and it's you're thinking about your deck and how many resources you're using in a way that you don't. So like, and I would say there are a few other matches like that where it's like, oh, this is pretty good. And then I think that the last third are just like these non-functional. You get into the map and the enemy just sort of wanders around like there's something wrong with it, and then you just kill it and you finish, and then that's the mission.
Maybe this makes Phantom Dust a very appropriate sequel to Armored Core. After our last episode. Oh yeah, Alan, go ahead.
Oh, I just did want to interject, and Zia, you can I'll send you the link to this. We did say that online is a wasteland. There is a pretty active Discord scene. I did joke about it earlier. And they seem like very enthusiastic about correcting for how bad this game is at teaching. There's like a whole newbie section in the Discord and lots of tutorials and stuff. So we can link that in the description or something.
That's not a red flag at all. That this game is really good at teaching, so we have a whole channel about teaching you how to play the game. Kaim, I think out of our group, you're the farthest along so far in the game, right?
Yeah, I think I'm according to like the walkthrough I was looking at, I should be close to finishing up.
Sick. Did you enjoy the ride so far? How many hours have you been playing?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's probably been like maybe like 5-6 hours.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, because some of it was just like messing around with like my arsenal, swapping out cards, or trying to like, because every time once you get the arsenal, which is what your deck is called, there's a shop that has like these booster packs called junk, and you can just like, that resets every time you finish a mission, so you can keep buying more cards. So I was looking for specific cards for my deck, and I was just messing around, tweaking and stuff like that. But there's even like that far in, there are still a couple of missions that will tell you to put a specific card in your deck so you can like try it out as so it's like still tutorializing a little bit. But there will be like there is still like some actual like missions, and there are like some actual boss fights like against like monsters instead of like the bot matches.
Yeah.
But,
oh, sorry.
I think. Yeah, oh yeah, but yeah. I mean, overall, I think it's like it's all right. I do think that. Because when you finish missions in store, you get like the memory boxes, and a lot of those are also just like those same tutorials in written form. Like some of them actually do have like some plot development, but a lot of it's like kind of regurgitating the same information. Like, oh, erase skills do this, shield skills do that, like stuff like that.
Yeah. I can definitely reciprocate the idea that some of the bosses there's an early boss that's this big, slow, sort of moving airship, and it's circling around the map, and then it basically teaches you about different hitboxes and positioning, and I wouldn't say it does it like in a super fun way, but it's kind of interesting. There's another point I had. Maybe Ryan, I'm curious, how much have you been playing? I think you said you only played like the first couple missions, right?
Yeah, like 1 or 2 months ago, because I
okay.
remembered that you could just download it for free. So I played like a couple tutorial missions. I said, this is cool, I will get back to it, and I've currently not gotten back to it.
Yeah, I guess like at least the fact that you had some motivation to like stick with it, I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying earlier that you can tell that the mechanics do have merit if you think about it in a multiplayer context, but then also, like John was saying, it's very easy to misunderstand the mechanics. I think that's the train that Pang was kind of on with it. I think he literally said on Discord, yeah, I thought this game was dog shit until I hopped on Quick Play. So I'm hoping. Oh yeah, the other thing I want to talk about is like people always throw around wildly different playtimes for the single player campaign. So one number I heard randomly was like 40 hours. And then on how long to beat, it's 17 hours. But then all the playthroughs I see on YouTube are like 10 hours. And then Kaim just said, okay, he's almost done. It's like 6 hours. So
It's tough to know where the NPCs are.
It's so
yes.
true.
That's a really that's a tough skill.
This is like the funniest thing about the remaster. So there's a bunch of little help options when you press pause, like how to play, and even a guide that tells you where all the NPCs are that you get the missions from, which I'm gonna strongly assume is not in the original Xbox version. Except all those features are just links to web pages, and none of those web pages work anymore. This is so awesome.
They need to patch the game for the archive.org links.
I'm reminded of the Final Fantasy IX strategy guide that
so sick.
just has a bunch of, oh, you want to learn about weapons? Go to this web page.
I guess like speaking on the mechanics, there's some stuff I could say that I have like on my brain. But Hot Pocket, like I trust you as the card gamer, as the mechanics gamer. I'm curious what your first impression of this game is generally, like in terms of its quality and like if you've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean the problem is I didn't play any multiplayer because
okay.
I kind of couldn't be asked before, and then by the time I was like, oh shit, I probably should play multiplayer before we do this, and then I like ran out of time. I didn't have much time to play. So, that's gonna put. I'll definitely play multiplayer before the next session.
Yeah, we have another session, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of weird, interesting stuff going on. I think. Yeah. I mean, I'm like. I feel like I just don't really understand the game yet. Like, just in terms of the sort of dynamics and like, I feel like you'd also need to play the same person like a couple times to like understand, because it just looking at like that Neosity site that the Dust God or whatever that Kaim sent me, where it's like, wow, there's a lot of decks that have very different styles and of things that you need to consider, that I think it'd be very difficult to just play them one time and be like, oh yeah, this is like, you know, unless you had a very intimate knowledge of like already everything and in a way that you could like easily determine, you know, oh, what are they doing? Why are they standing here? What, you know, if I attack them, will I get fucked over really bad, or what do I need to do? Type of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, John, go ahead.
I mean, that's one of the things I like, but I think they could have mitigated with the quick play mode, is like letting you select your letting you select a pre-made deck.
Yes.
Because I think the best matches, I think there was one where Ziad and I both had like the same deck, and we were very obviously kind of working towards the same end game. And then I think like I think Kaim and I also like got very close. Like Kaim beat me when we did like a best of 3, and it was like we both kind of had that experience like with what are the decks and what do they kind of want to do. But like I think none of us have actually had the experience of like a curated deck, and at like the range of options is really, really incredible. I mean, as far as, you know, you can do the low cost thing that Hot Pocket was talking about, and there's things you can account for where there's a thing called like memory of battle, where it's like if you use a bunch of like low cost attack cards, you can use this really powerful card that is based off, the damage is based off like all the attacks you've used. So, oh, that's an interesting synergy. And I think it's maybe another problem with the campaign is it gives you very boring cards initially. So like I think my perspective on like, oh, Phantom Dust is a card game is kind of like it's interesting, but it doesn't really fully explore the idea, is very different now that I'm looking at like the range of like multiplayer cards and some of the cards they're introducing me to into where I'm at in the campaign, and some of the erasure stuff and some of the environmental stuff. But again, it's one of those like why is this, you know, so many hours in that you're introducing the things that make this idea really compelling.
Yeah, one example scenario that I could name off the top of my head when I was playing with John yesterday, and this is really basic. It's not this insanely deep, fucking awesome strategy that I came up with, but um, I my deck happened to have the skill called Hyper Kick. Again, like quick play assigns you random decks. So I got the skill Hyper Kick. Only uses 2 aura, which is not a lot. And over the course of a match, I was playing very mindlessly. I built up my aura to about, like, let's say 12, 13. So this allowed me to use this Hyper Kick, which is this short range, low startup, but not very damaging attack. But because I built up, so the way you have to understand it is that when you use aura, it will start refilling on its own, up to your maximum threshold. So what this means is that a skill like Hyper Kick, even though it's very weak, I could use it many times in a row because I built up my resources so well over the course of the match. But then also, I had this other card, I forget the name, I think it was like Tiger or something, that gives you a buff for short periods, I think at the cost of aura recovery speed. And this aura recovery speed didn't matter too much because I had so much surplus, right? And then you can see how all those things synergize really well, right? I had this quick attack that wasn't intended to be strong, but I could make it strong with the buff. And then, again, because the attack was intended to be relatively weak, it was also low cost, so I could spam it many times in a row. And that was one of those moments where I really started to, okay, like I can see how there can be interesting synergies. And again, even with this random deck that I didn't understand and was sort of mindlessly playing, that arose really organically in the moment. That was really cool. I think generally, I'm not super familiar with TCGs at all. I had sort of a Yu-Gi-Oh phase as a kid, but I did not fucking understand that game even. The way aura, or let's say the way cards spawn on the deck, on the field, they always spawn as 3 at a time, and you have to draw the aura to get more to spawn, right? And you can only carry, I keep saying aura, I mean cards, I'm sorry. You can only carry 4 of those cards at a time. And that gets you into interesting dilemmas of okay, if I want a specific card later, I have to draw some other card that I don't want right now, but then I have to give something else up. So that's a thing that's really easily and immediately understandable, but still very interesting. I think especially the way they do it with the controller mapping is really nice, where the 4 face buttons on the Xbox controller, those are your card buttons. So when you're standing next to a card orb, you draw it, and then that's the button. You draw it by pressing one of the buttons, and then that's the button that the card is assigned to. And then you can do the same thing to replace a card as well, right? To that button. And then there's also the fact that I think for all of the attack skills, you have to stand still. Like you're locked into an animation that you can't cancel out of, and most of the attack cards have tracking, and the tracking works slightly different at like different ranges. Maybe Hot Pocket or John, does one of you have sort of thoughts on how that kind of dynamic works?
I think it's interesting because like it does. I think I think about like dominant strategies a lot, where it's like, here's the best way of playing, and this is a game where because you're having to give up, sometimes you get like a really good card at the beginning of a match, but you don't have the aura to use it, so it's like becoming kind of a liability that's weighing you down. So you give up like a really good card, which I think is cool. And then also because the engagement ranges are so different, you can have things like, I think the obvious example is there are like some bomb cards that they arc and they like make a big explosion. And they're really good for like pestering enemies from far away. You just throw them and like and you do damage, but they're terrible in enclosed spaces. So there are moments of like this is a really good high damaging card, but this might be like bite me in the ass when I throw it in a small area. There's like one map. It's like an old decrepit office building, and you can like destroy the ceiling above you, and you can like do damage to yourself that way, and then also like get debris to not fall on you. And I've actually it's been one of my favorite parts of the game is seeing all the weird like projectile patterns they've come up with. Like there was the one, and I think you were using the laser that was curving massively around the environment, and it's like exclusively for pestering people who are behind cover.
Yeah, this cover play I think is one of the most immediately noticeable things about the game. Someone put down in our notes it's an accessible fighting game, and I think that's super true, right? That it totally gets you into this zone of, okay, I need to actually wait for my opponent to whiff something, to miss an attack, before I can rush in. And again, the way you use the environment to sort of, almost play footsies with your opponent, right? The environment is also destructible. I think we mentioned it a couple times, but there's like pillars and even sort of different floors that you can break, and it is relatively scripted. It's not like Red Faction Guerrilla or something, but still seeing that in an old school fucking Xbox game, I was like, whoa, it's pretty cool. And it is pretty strategically meaningful as well.
Yeah. I also want to add that you can get a mulligan. So when a match starts and during the countdown, if you press the back or select button, whatever your controller is, it will re-roll the four cards on your buttons. So you can have like so if you got no aura in your hand and you have just a bunch of skills, you can just re-roll it one time.
Yeah.
And you can with countdown. Yes.
I think the real-time nature of this game is sort of an interesting consideration with the RNG nature of the card drawing, right? So, for example, if you're not getting the cards that you want immediately, you can stall for time in a way that you kind of wouldn't be able to in a turn-based game, right? Which is sort of interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
no, you go ahead.
There's also with the jumping and like the jumping versus the rolling or whatever. There's all these weird dynamics of like being able to basically, I mean, it's basically if someone like casts their combo on you in MTG and you're like, no, I'm just gonna dodge it. It's like really weird. And there's like all these things that interact with that too. Like there are buffs that you can buff and debuff the homing on moves so that they track more strongly or weakly, which I guess could be used as well, where you have like there are a few moves that are kind of like generically good but hard to aim, so that you just buff your homing by a lot and then be very difficult to dodge. And then like the Rap said in the chat, a lot of the game is about kind of playing around the environment to use that to dodge things, and so I think that interacts with the jumping, where the jumpers can kind of like jump around the map more easily, whereas the people who do the cartwheels can like just dodge in an obvious way. Just okay, like you would like iframe other games or whatever. Are there iframes on the roll? Does anyone know?
Didn't feel like it.
I don't think so.
Sure.
Okay, so but it's more straightforward to dodge things like that.
It felt pretty reliable, so yeah.
And there's like there's also cards that like there's a card type where you put down like a landmine and it's like you can't see it until you get hit by it. But jumpers, they can jump into the mine. Like if you jump into the mine, you'll take the damage, but you don't get stunned. It's like something that's like some weird mechanic that has to do with like jumpers. But there's also in multiplayer like the jumps and maybe the rolls vary between characters. Like apparently Freya, I think she has like the best jump because she has like less recovery on her jump or something like that. And it's like on that NeoCities link, there's like a whole section dedicated to dealing with players who play as her because of her jump.
The mines and that kind of shit is really neat because you can see your enemies' card pool as well, right? You can see the spawn location of their card orbs in the battlefield, and you can interact with that. You can steal some of their orbs with some skills, and obviously, kind of like you suggested, it makes sense to place mines over there. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, there was a match. It was like it was me, John, and Peng, and then John and Peng were fighting it out, and I had a skill called Diabolical Trick, which literally is just like, I delete your cards. So I was in John's spawn just deleting his cards, and then eventually and in this game, when you run out of cards, you slowly lose HP until you die. So he basically like bled out during that match, and then it was like me and Peng after that. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Like, what's happening? Why am I taking damage?
Somebody put down a note here, saying Microsoft plans to build an esports league, joining Forza, Halo, Gears as their next competitive title. Does anybody have thoughts on that? Like how the game may have slotted in that way?
That was for the reboot mostly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like if there was a fighting game that was going to do that, an arena fighter like this with a very simple control scheme would be the best option, right? But I think it's a good game. I think it had potential. I think it could have been a big hit. It had like more of a push behind it.
Yeah, I forget if I said this verbally already, but you can tell why Microsoft tried to reboot this. It feels like even playing the old ass Xbox version, right? It feels like it fits current mechanical trends. It feels like it's very. I said this already before, but like it feels very easily understandable why this game is sort of interesting and deep, and the types of decision that you're supposed to make. There actually was footage from the canceled reboot, like very early alpha footage or whatever, and it sort of looked shockingly close to the original. And I think maybe, I mean, I don't want to like overstate it, but like maybe that is a testament to how, even though it looks like this slow, clunky, kind of weird, hard to understand game, it's actually not that. I think you could actually hand this to a lot of multiplayer happy gamers, and they would sort of vibe with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the thing that really struck me, in the multiplayer matches that I played, was like how quickly people kind of were just sort of into it. Like, even yesterday, I think it was like we kind of saw, okay, this is why this game is cool. You wouldn't really get this, or you get glimpses of it in the campaign, but you get it very immediately in the multiplayer. And
yeah,
playing multiplayer for the first time really changed my opinion on the game, like, drastically.
I was getting my ass handed by John yesterday. I was not very good at it all, but still was having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really want to see try a 4-player match. That'd be fun.
Yeah, there's a team option, which I think
there's a tag team. Yeah,
that's
something like that.
That sort of seems like the focus, but the free for all is like that seems like my shit. Yeah, I would like that.
I like how varied the maps are too, because then there's like regardless of what map you pick, there's a lot of like destructible environments, and there's one stage that I'm assuming it looks like a final boss stage. As time passes, the ground just starts giving out and falls apart, and it's like barely any like movable area. But there's jump pads and stuff in it.
The jump pads are so sick, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm not like an old school Quake or Unreal Tournament guy, but like maybe it has like those vibes a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like oh, sorry.
Oh no, just like the arena shooter vibes.
Yeah.
Like, just play stuff on the map when you rely on the stuff on the map.
Exactly. Like just the fact that again the card orbs are part of the environment, and that's a consideration, right? The proximity to the orbs as well. Really get that sense from it. Does anybody have anything else they want to say for today about Phantom Dust? Maybe expectations for how the rest of the game is going to go. If they want to become like the premier Phantom Dust esports streamer, esports advocate.
I'm gonna come in here after I've beaten the game for the next call with the Prime Guilty Gear 2 Overture comparison, so y'all just be ready for that.
Fucking nice.
I'm gonna replay Mega Man Battle Network 6.
Oh hell yeah, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Just compare them.
That's Beach Gen. We should do that at some point.
Yeah.
Relia is probably screaming at me for not having mentioned it earlier when I was listing like this card obsession for games around this time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Chain of Memories too. Pang brought that up.
Well, that's
Oh,
not
yeah,
bring
God.
that one up. No.
Chain of Memories is goated. Chill my goat.
We play the GBA version, not the PS2 version, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, yeah.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's so funny that you naturally assume PS2 version because like it's just overridden the game's reputation.
Yeah, I mean, PS2 is more Beach Gen anyways, so I say go with that version.
So true.
So true.
We must keep going to get back what is ours. Phantom Dust.
Okay, we're back. Phantom Dust Session 2, final session. I have to admit, I did not finish the video game. Everybody boo me for a sec so I could feel the sting.
Also did not finish.
Yeah, I don't think
we booed together.
Yes, almost none of us finished it.
We got at
Good
least...
job, everyone who didn't finish it. Good work.
Yeah, we got 3 people that finished. John, Kime, and Alan.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That is more than I expected, actually, yeah. Alan, you were... it kind of surprised me because I think you've been pretty busy lately and you were kind of quiet on it, so I assumed, like most of us, you also just didn't have time to finish it. But no, you actually have an kind of interesting story there.
Yeah, so this game is like really far out of my wheelhouse, as I mentioned in the first session. And so it got me kind of kicking around ideas about like playing games that you have just like less context for than normal. So I decided to subject a few of my more well-adjusted friends to this game. One of them is like average like Nintendo fan. He's like play Smash Bros. And Zelda and Mario, and that's about it. And the other one is 6,000 hours in CS:GO and like 2 other games played ever. And so we cruised through. We played some multiplayer, and then all 3 of us beat the story.
That is so wild. Did you? I think you were saying earlier that you're glad that you played it, right? Do you have like thoughts on on the game as a whole, kind
of? It inspired a lot of thoughts about like what I like being creative, I guess. But I kind of didn't. The single player in particular, I came away and felt like, yeah, that was something. As I'm sure we'll get into, it's kind of like it's kind of like playing Final Fantasy 15, where your brain is just like, oh, that shouldn't be like that, like the whole time. But like I had a good time in spite of that. I don't think it was like a train wreck or anything. It's obviously like a really weird and out there idea to begin with, but yeah, I think we'll get into some of the more specific issues.
Yeah.
The friends who I mentioned a little before the call, the friends who played with me, their observation about the game and its kind of single player, multiplayer duality was that it was like Dark Souls. So we've got the real observations.
I think that is kind of an interesting point because I'm on such a different time scale for most of you guys, right? I'm over in Germany, so I got a nice multiplayer session with John after our first session actually, but it was kind of hard for me to keep up past that, and I just wondered like, okay, if I'd had some IRLs to play with me, then maybe that would have been a nicer way to sort of stick with it and keep at it. But I guess I'll say, like, after this podcast I will go back to it. I can't live with the stain. I do want to finish it. I think Kime, you were like the earliest person of us to finish, right? Probably.
Yeah. I'd like kind of like picked one day to just burn through the rest of
Nice.
the game. Yeah, it's like 30 missions or something like that.
Yeah, that was kind of my plan. I had the okay, which NPC do you have to talk to actually get the next mission guide next to me? And I did I did make good progress, but like I didn't quite get it. Do you have like thoughts on it overall?
I kind of like I think like I kind of like how they fit in some like actual boss fights in between like the bot matches.
Yeah.
But I do like it took me a while to realize that it's not that most of like there's 106 missions in the game total, and I want to say a good 85-90% of those are like kind of like glorified tutorial missions. Because it's like, okay, I want you to use this card, so you need to like build your deck, like a whole new deck around this
I
card.
have so many
And
thoughts
then,
about that.
yeah, and one of the mission requirements would be like, okay, you have to actually use this card in its actual like situation to like, you know, clear the mission and stuff like that. Because like Judge of Anubis is like the one where you have to like kind of watch your HP, and then you have to like get your HP to a certain level, and then you use Judge of Anubis to like one shot the enemy, which is like its proper situation, and then you get the clear for that and stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of felt like I was waiting for like I feel like there's a lot of situations where I was just waiting for like when are like the real missions going to show up, but I feel like all of them were kind of just like, you know, specific situations they wanted you to play in, because it's like the whole thing is kind of like a tutorial. But I don't know. It was I think the I was kind of surprised at how spread out the actual like story cutscenes and stuff were. I feel like it was longer than maybe it was a little bit longer than it needed to be, at least the mandatory missions.
John, you last night finished your desperate sprints to hit the credits. Yeah, I remember you telling me there was a big twist sort of halfway through the game that kind of hooked you again, and I actually got to that twist today myself, and I was like, that's certainly not what I expected. Like, it is kind of this weird thing that you I feel like often get with maybe I'm being a little bit too stereotypical when I say this, but like with Japanese media where okay, there's a concept like memory or something, but then this specific writer just has a totally weird spin on it that you wouldn't have expected. Do you have like maybe thoughts on the game as a whole and like also the story?
I think for me, I know I get kind of like attached to arcade games, like that's the kind of thing. I think the other genre core game would be, you know, weird fucking games like this where you go, huh, that was interesting. Like you're glad that you played it like a year later, and you know, slightly maybe broaden your definition or broaden your sense of what games could be. And I think that was what I took away a lot from this was like glad to have played it, and I was continually like kind of, you know, sort of wrestling with the fact that, of the two disciplines of like the kind of card game strategy layer and like the action game, you know, positioning and your neutral game coming into play over the course of it. And I remember like that was actually kind of as frustrating as the final boss was. I sort of liked the fact that I was using like at the end it was kind of like a combination of both like remaking the deck and like learning its strategies, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But yeah, I think I agree with everyone else who's finished it, where it's so clearly like a tutorial, but it's also like a weirdly paced tutorial, because they give you like some of the later missions will give you like pre-made decks to play around with, and they actually do like a better job of teaching you like fundamentals, and it's like it really brings into focus how like redundant some of the early game like, missions are, because it really is like teaching you what the buttons do, and that's something you would get in like a mission, and you don't need to spend maybe an hour or whatever with Bullet of Fire and the pre-made decks that they give you, or they don't even give you a deck, but they just like, you know, here's a map, and then we're gonna slowly like ease you into here are the rules and here's how it plays, and it's like they could have just started you right away. And it's I think I pulled that Futatsuki interview, and I was really wondering about how like the focus testing may have informed it. I think that was something we all noticed with like how they don't use any card game terminology in the game itself. But there's the weird like tutorial lady who's like, you can use your arsenals to combine different skills, and they don't say, oh, you can put different cards in your deck, and it's like
I thought that was like even early on, just the lack of obvious card iconography was very strange to me, right? You think about something like Yu-Gi-Oh, right, where it's it's the most iconic Japanese card thing, and they play so hard with the aesthetic and make it look cool, like in a very physical, visceral way, and the fact that they didn't play with that here is very curious. I mean, this game still has a very unique aesthetic, right? But it's so obviously and explicitly inspired by specifically Magic the Gathering. So yeah, like you said, it's sort of interesting that they didn't really capitalize on that seemingly. You were even saying in the pre-show that maybe it would have actually been more conducive to learning the game and like getting into it faster if they did the quote-unquote lazy fighting game arcade mode, right?
Yeah. I was thinking. I actually went through a lot of the game with a really I think a really basic deck throughout. Like that was one of the reasons like the final boss was such a wall for me, was I had to go and actually kind of think about synergies for the really the first time in the entire playthrough. And I was like, okay, it's something we even kind of noted with the quick match, which is that also uses pre-made decks, but there's still a huge amount of like the cards and combinations you wouldn't have a chance to see. And I was wondering, like, would it be better because they have that like little character select? Would it be better to have like some 30-minute single player campaigns where you do like 5 missions and as each of the individual characters, and they each kind of have a deck that like gives you a sense of what this school of magic is like. Oh, this is what like Laser is working towards, or whatever that one deck is called. But like here, like the sort of the general sense of like, here's the game plan for each of the decks. Here's like a vampire deck and a laser deck and a physical one where you like delete cards and you harass them with hyper kick or whatever. And I don't know. And I think the Final Fantasy 15, I have not like played that, but I hope I get what you're saying. But it was like, I think with this, there was a lot of what I like about the game is it's like, oh, they're like halfway there. And if you like maybe expanded like the hub area more and you added like side quest, or if like there were different like ending quests that would give you specific cards depending on like who, which character you sided with, and that like maybe changed the state of the world or the state of the hub area by the end of the game. That would have actually kind of indicated the weird like quest structure and the elaborateness of the single player campaign. But it's like, in actuality, it's like, yeah, you're doing bot matches for 8 hours or whatever.
Yeah. I was saying in the pre-show that it is sort of admirable that they tried to like concoct this weird elaborate story around what is basically bot matches, when they could have done the easy thing of doing a fucking fighting game arcade mode. Yeah.
I was trying to parse if I was just like being a hypocrite, because I had that same thought. I was like, oh, but it's cool that they went for it. And then I thought, and I was like, anytime a fighting game or like an FPS like goes for it with like a campaign, I'm like, quit wasting your money on shit I don't care about.
That is so fucking true.
But I think it is a bit more earned when you're making something weird to begin with.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like everybody's played a first-person shooter at this point. There's no, you don't need to like ease people in with a campaign or something. And I mean, I guess at like Call of Duty scale, you've always got people who it's their first video game, but I don't know.
Yeah, just
yeah, go ahead.
you go. Oh, just to add on to what John was talking about, how like if they did like different routes for different like endings. I had wrapped up there's like 5 or 6 post game missions after you finish the game, and it kind of revolves around like the remaining characters of the story, about how they're coping with like the revelation that's revealed in the twist, and like what's going on after you beat the final boss. And they have like little things to say about what they're going to do after the game's over and stuff like that. It's just kind of cool, but it was really unexpected, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
Pang, you weren't present last time. I was curious about your general impressions, how far you got, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I played the least out of probably anyone on the call. I really only made it to the end of chapter 3. I didn't even make it to the twist. If y'all spoil the twist, I don't care. It's a fucking again. I got pretty burnt out on the single player. It's funny because I think like even like an easy thing they could have done is just cut the first 2 chapters entirely, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
you basically have like a whole 2 chapters of like here's how to like you can't control your decks at all, and you're just sort of like randomly using cards, and they don't even really do an explain like they don't do like a really great job explaining like all of like the extra features that you might have missed, like how exactly the HUD works. I didn't realize how to like look up what my cards did like in battle until I think one of y'all mentioned it like during multiplayer. Like it sort of throws you in the deep end, and you just have to sort of wade through that for 2 chapters, and then you're like, okay, here's deck building, and then they just sort of reteaches you what all the cards do, and it's like, well, why did I go through that whole part where it was like showing me all the different classes of cards and shit if I just had to redo it while also making a deck? So yeah, I sort of ended up in that like I would always tell myself like, okay, I'm gonna grind for like a few hours, and then I would be like, I played 4 missions, and it was just me spamming bullet fire the whole time, and like, oh, okay, I got like entangle and then gravity press. Okay, cool, I got the setup. That was fun for 5 seconds. Now back to bullet fire, like shit like that. And so I sort of I petered out on it. I thought the multiplayer was a lot of fun. I think my Dark Souls is like I was laughing quite a bit at that. My weird comparison would be Power Stone. I had a little bit of like a Power Stone meets card game feel to it, especially with like obviously the environmental interactions are not as strong in Power Stone as they are here. But it has sort of that like weird party game feel to it a little bit, and how it's set up, even though it's obviously like going for something a little more competitive, right? I feel like I don't know. It's one of those games. It's like I can see the vision, but it's taking me a long time to like just sit and learn all what all the fucking cards do, and like even just with the quick decks, like y'all were saying, if there was like if I could sit down with like one of the decks I actually liked and just grind it and like get a feel for like what the different like combo routes are, what the different like it's getting a feel like what I should be doing early game and mid game and end game, and like how to adapt in certain situations. It's like I'm sort of playing 2 separate games where one of which I'm like I get to control my deck, but it's boring as shit, and the bots are not very convincing enemies, right? And then the other one is like yeah, and the other one is okay, cool. There's this really interesting game here with a lot of like amazing synergies built up, and like I'm reading these guys and it seems really fantastic, but I'm also sort of going in and it's all quick matches, and they're I don't get to actually control what my deck is, so I'm just bouncing around between these different pre-made decks. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the mechanical base is really interesting. There's definitely quality of life shit and just general like weirdly anti-competitive or like there's certain interactions that'll happen, or like especially I think the big thing that bugs me most about this game is the stages. The stages are wonky, to say the least. They're very it feels like there's a couple that are set up as like, okay, here's are like more competitive stages you can actually sort of get a feel for, and then some of them are like, why the fuck did you set it up this way? It's like it's sort of asymmetrical. There's like the spawn points are randomized, and there's like obvious like better points, right? Especially for like certain decks where like you'll get in a spawn point that's good for one deck but not for another, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna switch to this deck, and then next time you spawn in somewhere else, and it's like, well, what the fuck did I do that for, right? It's very I don't know, very very strange game.
Yeah, we should have played with the mode that lets us pick our decks. We haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
Wait, there's
I think
that?
we meant to.
You can make
Yeah,
your own
'cause-
decks for multiplayer, and you can
Oh,
play with
okay,
that.
sorry. I thought
Quick is pre-made, yeah.
yeah, because I wanted to stress that I think the mode with the pre-made decks, you cannot select the decks, right? They're always randomly assigned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Oh my god. There's like Alan was using the word duality earlier, right? I feel like I'm gonna come back to that a lot because like it really shocks me just how smart the game is in its base design and how fun it is. And yet there's so much low-hanging fruit that made me think, what were they thinking? Like, where I genuinely could not arrive at an explanation for why it is the way it is. But we'll get to that, yeah.
Well, I think it's like more surprising considering like this. We're also, I think the majority of us are, or I think all of us are playing the Xbox One like remaster where they
Yeah.
did make some apparently they made some changes, and I think the quick match mode was actually like included in it, like exclusively in this like remaster. Like I think Hot Pocket or Khan was saying that like the decks that were made by like members of like the Phantom Dust community.
Yes.
Which I think that makes it especially weird that you can't just like select the decks that you want to use, because it's like that would actually be the time. And this is so minor, but like the fact that like in the single player, if you have to retry, it boots you back out to like the title menu, not even like not even like the not even like the hub area, but they boot you back out. Like you can retry with the same deck, or you can just go back over, and it's not ruinous. But it's you know, it's a game, like card games are like all menus, like it's all about sorting stuff and organizing all this, and it's like the actual process of that for so much of the game, like the UI, I think is surprisingly bad for like a release where they should have been able to maybe alter some stuff with kind of like, oh, and especially if they were kind of maybe framing this as something back in 2017 that was maybe meant to get like a new audience interested in the Phantom Dust IP. It's like weird to me how it's like it's kind of been built with like, okay, this is for the 5 of you guys that actually played it at release, and newcomers, whatever.
Yeah, this is a real quick aside. I forgot to put this in the notes, but I said last time I was gonna play Magatama for this episode, the only other game that Xbox Game Studios Tokyo worked on. I actually did install it on my Xbox, and it would not boot. Yeah. So that's the story there. And I tried the Xbox, like the classic Xbox version of Phantom Dust. And like it's sort of what you would expect. Like, okay, the game just looks much nicer in 480p with a nice scaler than it does with AI upscale textures, right? And I did feel like the controls were sort of more responsive. I don't have anything like objective to like attach this to. And then I thought it was funny that you mentioned the retry thing, John, that because like you have to imagine, okay, on the Xbox or on a modern PC, sorry, on Xbox Series X or S or whatever, load times are really fast, so it doesn't really matter that much. But then imagine doing that when the game has to read from a DVD, right? Yeah. The thing is that that game also, I could not get into an actual match because the moment I booted into a mission, my Xbox crashed. So,
Damn.
Like, Xbox Game Studios Japan cursed. Maybe that's why they failed. I don't know. Because you can't play it on a hacked Xbox over the hard drive. I guess maybe transitioning to multiplayer, more positive subjects in general. I know y'all had a recent session where you played a lot. Maybe Pang, do you have some more impressions on that, or?
Yeah, I think that was I haven't been in quite as many multiplayer sessions as some of the other people in here. But I think it was the first time I was actually sort of grasping like the pathways, right, for some of those built-in decks. I did play Magic a decent amount when I was like I don't know, like I did actually. This is a funny story, so I might as well tell it on here. I was in daycare when I was, elementary age, right? And so when I was in like 5th grade, we all got Yu-Gi-Oh decks, right? And there was this teacher that we had who was sort of like a little bit of a bum. He sort of just like was like 30 working at this daycare. But he also he would bring in like subbed Naruto like DVDs that he burned and like shit like that. And so he saw us playing Yu-Gi-Oh for like a week, and so the next week he comes in with just these like a bunch of plastic bags, and he starts pulling out all these cards. He's like, we're like, what are those? He's like, yeah, I'm about to show you how to play a real game. And it was 3,000 Magic the Gathering cards, his entire collection from 1993 when it started.
Oh my god.
So he had years and years and years worth of cards. So he taught us all how to play and gave us pre-made. He was basically he gave us quick match. He gave us like a bunch of different decks that he built to work with, and had like a lot of like nice rare cards from like older like legacy sets and shit. So it's funny that made me think of that because I used to play a mill deck where it's like you would run you'd basically run these 2 cards that would mill 10 cards off the top of the opponent's deck, and then you'd put these enchantments on them that would make them go past the monster wall that the other person had set up, so they could hit the other player directly, and then you could just mill constantly. And your goal was just to set up as many of those as you could and like keep like protect them, right? And so it was cool. It was cool, like going from single player where it's very much like it's very meat and potatoes, especially at the start. right? It's sort of still a lot of like, okay, there is this whole card game aspect, but most of your, at least the synergies I were using was mostly is very like physical, right? It's very like, okay, I'm gonna do some meaty damage, and I might like entangle the other person or like do lift up or whatever, and keep in one place and do a bunch of damage, and the rest is just sort of like picking away at them with like high tracking moves, right? So to see like in the quick match, it's like, okay, there's this mill deck, and you can actually like run around and I can actually just destroy the opponent's cards, and if they get down, if they lose all the cards in their deck, then they start like just dying, right? It's like, okay, it's like they actually translated things to this game in such a way that it like makes sense from both the magic perspective, but also that like action perspective, because it's not only like, okay, I'm like hitting you for to mill your cards. In this case, it's like you actually have to like sort of sneak into their base, right?
Yeah.
And you're playing keep away, and every single time you use that like one of the eraser moves where it'll like destroy a card from their deck, it's always it's gonna like take some time, right? So it sort of has that like a little bit of that like sort of multiplayer keep away aspect, where it's like, well, if they're puppy guarding a little bit, then you need to be like strategic or like lure them away, right? Or if you're playing 2v2s, like have someone like keeping both the opponents at bay, and then like sort of sneak back and put in like erase stuff. Or I think there's another deck in there that's sort of like a traps deck, right? And it's got like this freeze gas, and it's got the sensor mine, and so time kept going back into my my deck and just putting mines around all my cards, and I'm just sitting getting fucked up over and over again, which is like annoying, obviously, but also like, okay, that's like actually like strategic play. Actually, like you have to like think differently about how you interact with the physical hand. I don't know how much y'all talked about the physical hand in the last session. I've meant to re-listen before like right before the session. I didn't end up getting to, but I do really like the way that there's like you sort of have 7 cards to work with at any given time, but then also you have 4 of them actually in your hand, and if you want to pick up one from the ground, it's actually gonna like delete a card from your hand. So you have to like you have to spend a lot of time thinking like, okay, do I want to like, even if I have something that's infinite use that's pretty good, do I want to keep around for early game and then erase it with something else that's going to be better later on? Or like, how am I actually going to route this in such a way that I'm not going to like waste a card hoping that I get a better card later, like that kind of thing. And the physicality of it, where it's actually like you sort of have to interact with it and like sort of see where you spawned, what exactly is like around you, what kind of natural cover you have near your spawn, right? Which again is as I mentioned earlier, very asymmetric, and I don't like that part of it. But at the same time, I do appreciate how it's like they sort of visualize it in this very action game way, where it's like, okay, it's actual like territory that you need to claim, right? It's actual like you need to think about it in like a physical way and not just like an abstract way, right? Which I think they could have gone that route. But I'll hop off the mic for a second. I don't want to like pop one of the hook into any of the things I brought up.
Yeah, no, you're totally good. That the physical deck actually is something that I really want to talk about as well. Again, because I appreciate it even more now with more time in the game. Because yeah, everything you said is true, and even just the fact that you choose when you draw more cards, right? Which is as far as I'm aware, that's not really a dynamic you can capture in most like turn-based kind of card games, right? Like you either have the choice of, okay, do I expend like a single use card or something, or do I overwrite one of the cards that I currently have? And you know, overwriting it is sort of wasting it, right? But then if I want to use it and expend it, I actually have to move away from my physical deck, right? I actually have to take that risk and like be a little proactive. So that constant pressure to have to make more cards appear in the field, something I find really compelling. Hot Pocket, I think you're also at a point where you're a pretty big fan of like just the general game design here, right?
Oh yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of super interesting things going on. I mean, I've played a lot of. I think I said this in the last episode, but I've played a lot of Magic Gathering, so I do have some sort of context here. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what Pang said, where it's a lot of the card game sort of concepts, but transposed into like an actual physical environment with like projectiles and spacing and all that. Something that I think that's funny about that stuff you're talking about earlier with like deleting people's cards is Magic the Gathering is sort of notorious because they stopped adding effects like that. Like after a certain point. Well, this game was made in 04, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so back then, that Magic would have still had a lot of that stuff. Where in like there was an archetype called, because on Magic you basically you use like something called lands to like cast your you play your cards. It's like in this game you have the little like I forget what it's called, the aura, I think. But it's like the cost of your cards and it regens over time, you know? That like resource you spend. In Magic, there's a lot of stuff that in especially like older cards that's like, you know, Disintegrate in this game.
Yeah.
For those who played multiplayer, that is a very old Magic the Gathering card.
Classic.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting that the game has a lot of that stuff in it, whereas I feel like it's a lot more. It's a lot less annoying, I think, than like actual Magic the Gathering, because again, it's like a physical projectile that you can dodge and sort of play around. Like Disintegrate, the hole has the little hole that pops up under your feet. You can just dodge the hole. So at the very least, you have to like do a setup to try to like make it more likely to hit people. And so I think something also that's different, that's like a key difference I noticed, is that this game, things that are traditionally hidden information in other card games are actually shown to you explicitly. You can tell what type of cards is in somebody's hand, which is a very big difference, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like you can see, you know,
If
like
you see the blue, for
an
example,
attack.
you know they can defend. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of interesting because you can kind of see what, you know, if you kind of have an idea of what the person's deck is, you can sort of guess to some degree what they might be, you know, what they might have and like what they're doing. And that comes into play too with that like deleting cards thing, which this is not, I wouldn't say this is a huge part of the game. It's just a thing you can do, but I'm just, it's a good example that shows a lot of the weird decisions in this game, where like because you can see the type of cards in somebody's hand, that contextualizes what cards on their field you might want to try to delete, try to like, you know, get them stuck with bad cards they have to draw through.
Because it's sort of like, I think the one I mentioned earlier is like you can erase stuff that's on the field, but you also have like a lot of abilities to like, there's like a shield. I forget the name of it. It's like something hold or whatever. Yeah. Yes. And that one, it's like if you successfully block their projectile, then it'll erase it from their hand, right?
Yeah.
And you sort of like use that as like a strategic way to like, okay, they've got like something really annoying that's like infinite use in their hand. I'm gonna instead of like going to their hand or physical hand on the field and like trying to erase something or like that whole dynamic, I'm just gonna sort of bait it out of them and then delete it, right? And then they'll be sort of stuck with it without like for the rest of the game unless they have like a duplicate in their deck, right? I think there's a couple that it's like you can just sort of like hit someone and like just delete all of the defense items in their hand or whatever. And it's like
black or something like that.
Yeah, and it's like sort of it took me some time to like sit and learn how like, oh, I actually need to like be checking everyone's hands like constantly if I'm playing that kind of deck. Because there's also with that real-time element, like things in the card game where you can sort of like sit and consider is like you have to sort of be like the way the HUD works in this game with so like a lot of like information on it, you sort of have to like learn how to like multitask a little bit. It's like a nice little overlay on top of the actual like moving around, like dodging projectiles, etc. Because I'm not gonna lie, I took so much damage early game, especially like in the first couple multiplayer sessions we did, because I got fucking hit while reading my cards. Because it takes like actual time, like real time. Yeah. I think that part of it is really interesting. I'm sure that's something that the more you play, it becomes second nature, right? But comparing to like an actual like turn-based version of this kind of thing, it felt like something I actually had to like sort of think around, right? Like very consciously, which I'm not used to in these kinds of games.
The dynamic in quick play is just especially interesting because, like, obviously you don't have any familiarity with what you're gonna get most likely if you're first getting into it. And I was just like, I was streaming my game to John as I was playing against him, and I was just like literally standing still, sitting down, like reading every single description, and like John obviously owning me, and like it got to the point where he felt bad, like, oh no, I should let you read the thing.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, like I would have done the same.
There are some. Oh, there are after like after us playing multiplayer enough times, like since quick play only is like limited to like a specific amount of decks. There's like a lot of other cards that we haven't seen. Like there are cards that will actually lock out specific schools of cards for like a minute.
So like, Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, so it's
there's a lot of old Magic the Gathering cards like that. They stopped printing those.
Yeah, because there's like for example, there's an environmental card called Stagnant Air, and it prevents people from using nature skills for 1 minute and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's like a lot of stuff like that, and then stuff like like there's one card where all the skills that are on the field you can convert even for other people their cards to aura. So there could be like some attack skills up, and you can just convert everyone's cards to aura like on the field and stuff like that, or erase all the aura on the field, or erase aura from your own deck. Like if you're trying to like get to like a specific card faster, if you already have like, and that which is like nice if you already have like enough aura to do what you need to do and stuff like that. Yeah.
This is sort of a random thought, but I was talking to Luke earlier, and he was saying that it's sort of strange that with games we kind of keep getting inspired by like one concept that we really liked, and then just adapting it and readapting it and like changing and tucking like and adding some stuff, right, that we think might make it cooler, right? And how it's this like infinite cycle of like recycling stuff. And I feel like this example like found us as an example of that with Magic the Gathering, where it's kind of shocking just how many things are one-to-one literally translated. I feel like that's a really good example of that, because like the context is inherently so different, and it has such a deep impact on how things actually play out that it turns into something really with a lot of merit.
Yeah, I mean, a huge difference is the fact that your attacks are actual projectiles that are in the field that you must dodge or whatever. That's something that's sort of weird about this game. It's interesting. It's fun to play around. The way the range system works, so there's like 3 ranges. They're short, medium, and long. And so if you're in the correct range and you shoot the projectile, usually for most of projectiles, it'll home in to some degree, right? So like the little bullet, the fire bullet, right? It has some homing to it if you're in the medium range. You can kind of like sidestep it if you have enough movement, but like but then a weird thing is that it will actually, it seems like a lot of ones like anti-home, they like will they will repulse away from the enemy if you're at the incorrect range. But you can still kind of force it to hit sometimes if you aim it weird. Like there's a move called Slide Laser so the listed range is long, right? And basically it does this big horizontal right parabola, like to the enemy. And so in mid range it's not gonna hit ever, basically. But like if you kind of aim very much to the left, then you can sort of get it to hit sometimes anyway, because it's a real projectile that is traveling along the screen.
Yeah,
but it's like that is a much more difficult way to use it.
Yeah,
there can be a lot of skill involved there.
I saw in the descriptions for the quick match decks, and it's like if you look on like Phantom Dusted on archive.org, it's like got the list of them and like little description how to use them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it like explicitly says like if you're like in a pinch in close range, turn off your lock on and then shoot someone point blank with Slide Laser and it'll work.
Yeah.
Like, I did have a couple times where like one thing that bugs me is that So there's like I think we're talking about some short range moves. Like we'll have like a sort of a lunge to them, but then they won't lunge if you aren't like locked on at short range, which just feels like it feels very counterintuitive, right? I guess you could like manipulate that in certain ways. Like if you see them approaching, you can like disable lock on and then
Yeah, I did
bust out
that
the
a
move
couple
and
times.
like running your hitbox. But it's very like it's sort of where like that's one of the cases where I think like the action game part of it sort of gives way to the card game part in a little bit of a weird way, and it sort of like stops working as you'd expect for an action game, which I wasn't as big of a fan of that stuff. There's also some other stuff with like the I think in general the tracking projectiles, I wish there was a little bit more consistency across the board, right? It feels like there's a lot of like very bespoke like tracking like ranges or like velocities and
Yeah,
like
definitely.
approach angles that are like you sort of just have to sit and learn like, oh, this specific card is gonna have this really weird like what is that like Venom Fang or whatever, or am I thinking the right one where it like it gives you this debuff that if you use any of your buttons for like 10 seconds or so, you like take damage, right?
Yeah, that and Demon's Poison, yeah.
Or does Demon's Poison?
Demon's Venom or something like that.
There's
Yeah.
a couple that have the effect that say something poison.
At least one of them has a projectile that like spawns super far above your head.
Yeah, Demon's
and then
Venom,
like and it'll like slowly track down. I got hit so many times because it like, for one, it's usually like off. It's like usually higher than your camera, right? So you sort of have to like make sure you're looking up, and then it's slow to the extent that I would like almost always like defend too early, right? And that one's especially annoying on stages with ceilings because the fucking I at one point dealt myself 8 damage from debris by using it in a room, and it spawned above the ceiling, like on the floor above me, and then moved down towards the enemy I was targeting on my level, which then caused it to hit the ceiling from above, which
Oh, you're cutting out? Oh no.
really terrible, but
We
that
should talk about the maps.
yeah, panorama is that what it's called? The fucking like
think
bombed up
so,
building.
yeah.
That shit
Yeah.
is terrible on so many different levels. It's so bad. If like one of y'all wanted to like to describe it and like go into it.
Yeah, wait, is Panorama the one with the... Sorry, I think I cut out for a second. I didn't get some of the...
What?
I think my internet cut out for a sec, so I didn't hear Pang for a couple seconds, but...
Am I still in for everyone else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't...
Yeah, I was
that's the thing,
basically talking about...
oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was talking about there's a stage panorama, right? Where there's this like particular if you use like an effect that causes your projectile to like spawn super high, it'll like impact the ceiling. And then at one point I hit myself for 8 damage because it
oh yeah, no,
it just rained debris on my head.
I still got that.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, I was memeing about this earlier. Basically, there's this mission later in the single player where you're fighting these eyeball creatures. I posted about it in Discord. It's like, I mean, it's a big claustrofall in the Strange City. Yeah, that is the map. So it's the map with the sideways, like 90-degree sideways skyscrapers that you're sort of standing on. And in that specific mission, you start on this, sort of like a sniper's perch, and it's opposite to another sniper's perch where the enemies are already at. And the cover is arranged in this very weird way where there's destructible cover right behind you, and then it's sort of adjacent to these like weird bumps in the floor that form this like tunnel that you can walk through, and then you can hide behind cover there, right? And I noticed, okay, it takes really long to get out of cover and like get back in range to actually hit enemies, right? And especially when you're an AI that's always well, I mean, I'm not gonna say the AI is super smart, right? But like it only has so many routes that it moves, and like it always knows the perfect moment to aim, right? So I had this very strange situation where the moment I pop back out, I just instantly got sniped. And it got to the point where I would start the mission, and see what skills I had, and if I did not have a defense skill, I would just restart, because like there was no fucking point doing it. Yeah. And I was convinced. I did not check the meta. I do not know like what the vibe is there, but I'm convinced this has to be the worst map of the game. Like there's so many there's these narrow paths that like lead you up that as a human player it's sort of easy to fall off sometimes maybe. But then obviously the AI is just always going to walk it perfectly and use that to just run circles around you whenever it's recharging aura or when it's trying to get a card or something. Just how easy it is to play keep away in that map and how annoying it is to like move around covers. It was something else.
No, that was something that was born out in multiplayer too. Because if you get like one of those, there's the two like the only places the spawn should be like on top of the two opposite buildings, but you can spawn in the middle building, which is like you can just shoot. Basically, you can just shoot down. You can be in one of the sniper perches, or you can use crawlers, which will fall off like buildings and still chase you around. So it's like it is one of the worst or like most pronounced examples of like the perils of like that kind of asymmetrical design.
This is sort of not on this topic, but I wanted to say a little bit more about the tracking. I had a really nice moment earlier where earlier today when I was playing it, there's a close range skill called Key Palm that basically you charge it, and then the more you charge it, the more aura it uses, but then it also gets stronger. And again, it's close range, so it tracks at that range. And a really nice strategy that occurred to me is like, oh, I can just use it to like I'm gonna use it basically at 0 aura cost if I just tap the button, and it's gonna home me into the enemy and like stagger them for a second, and then that lets me like do my big fucking vacuum slash or something, right? I thought it was just really nice how you can, again, it's another example of, okay, you can use the tracking system and the physical nature of everything to kind of rethink the usefulness and the different use cases for each card. Yeah, it's really cool like that.
Well, there's a card called, I think, like Dazzle, where it changes like your assigned buttons, which is like that's like its stated effect. But then the other thing is it comes to pretty like it staggers the enemy for a second. So
oh god,
it's basically like a better version of like Entangle or something, because it like lets you set up some of those in a similar way. It like lets you set up those big attacks, and it even ties in with like the control scheme, because there are a few other cards where you don't know if you got to this, like I think the hardest mission, or the most like the mission I was the most like vividly aware of like all the weirdness of this game, was there's one where you fight like the guard robot that the guy is training, and all he does is shoot you with Dazzle, which changes what your buttons do, and I think there's a move called like Brain Concussion, which like inverts your controls, and so you have to like pull backwards on the stick to go forward, and you're in the refinery level, and it's like it is about as like asinine build as you could think of, and it's especially because it's like when you target enemies, like your movement is kind of in relation to them. So if they're moving around and you're moving around, like it can make some of those catwalks extra treacherous. And I was especially feeling that where I was like, it was like this stealth mission where I was like walking on a tightrope, trying not to like fall off the edge of the map and respawn at my own base.
I feel like maybe that's a good transition into how our feelings into the single player, or about the single player, as we got deeper into it. Maybe to answer the question, does it ever evolve past being just bot matches? No, it kind of doesn't. I think you already mentioned that as well.
Outside of like the occasional boss fight, I wouldn't say it really does.
I already said this in the first session, but Matthew Matosis has a really good video about this, that games with sort of symmetrical multiplayer type of mechanics, they will always struggle to like make an engaging single player, right? It's never gonna be all that enjoyable to fight bots with what is supposed to be symmetrical mechanics. I also we touched on this a little bit, but this game's attempts to teach you how to play, they feel you very clearly see the intent, but I don't think it's effective at all. So, for example, there are a lot of missions where they tell you, okay, use this specific card, right? Which sounds easy enough, right? You just put the card in your deck and you go. Except no. Obviously there's the whole system of the, I think, 5 or 6 different schools, I think, where every card is assigned to a school, and your deck can only consist of a limited number of different schools, right? At this, I think for most of the game it's just 2 schools, and you get a 3-school deck at the very, very end of the game. Yeah, and because of that, if you're on a mission that requires you to use a specific card, it also means, okay, you probably have to change your whole ass deck to accommodate for that particular school, right? And the quality of life involved with that is like is mind-blowing. It's you can't, so first of all, you can't simply save your deck and then start one from scratch and like recall the original deck later. No. There's different arsenal, deck cases that you put the cards or skills or whatever in. So, and those cost in-game currency, right? So unless you have those 2 different or multiple arsenal cases, you will always have to reset your deck to 0 and then swap in the new cards, right? Which is already like, okay, like, is there any reason why it would be like that? I can't see it. And then I had a little meltdown earlier because I was streaming the game to y'all, and I realized that, okay, even if you go through the process of like wasting like 5,000 in-game currency on a second arsenal case, you can't just add duplicate cards. Any card that is already in one of your arsenal cases, you can't just make a duplicate of it in the new one. Like, you have to remove it from the original case and then put it in the new one. And God, like, I think Hot Pocket, you were theorizing earlier, like the only explanation for this is that it's just baked into the code, and once they realized it was too late.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I do for a job is like programming support work, and like if you make decisions like that in like the decoding, and then you get past a certain point and there's too much other code that is reliant on it being coded that particular way, they're gonna say it's not worth it to change it, and it's just go, well, whoops, they shouldn't have done that.
I'm gonna say it would have been worth it. I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna make that bold claim. Like,
you should have been you should have been one of the managers.
I should have been Redmond. Like, I should have been there. Like, God.
Yeah,
they
that's
needed
true.
Me. God, like,
they should have fixed it in the remaster. Actually, though,
Yeah, I was surprised too.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add about the schools is that for each school in your deck, that affects how fast your aura regens. So if you play a 3-school deck, your aura will have the lowest recharge time.
That's really cool.
It'll take longer to recharge. Yeah. So if you played a 1-school deck, then it would come back way faster than someone playing a 2 or 3 deck.
I thought the whole time, yeah, okay, there must be some kind of trade-off, but like I wasn't aware of what it would be. It's really cool.
From reading online, it seems like from like deck building guides I read, they were almost always like, yeah, don't even fucking bother with 3-school because the aura recovery is so low. Like, unless you have particular cards that like defray that, or you have like yeah, like just don't even bother, which I found interesting.
I guess I'll say again, like, this attempt, okay, we'll get you to use different cards or different decks or specific cards, whatever. I was saying earlier as well, I feel like you could have just handed me a whole ass deck, like, okay, play with that for a while, and it would have been probably, I want to say equally as effective, but probably more effective and way less time consuming. It's just like, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say they do it occasionally. They will actually,
okay.
And it's the weirdest thing is I think like it's like after chapter 4, post twist, They do more like weird little convenience features like that, and there's stuff like there's the pre-built decks where I was like, okay, this I finally know how to. I finally have like a chance to kind of play around with this thing, and it's only for a mission, which is weird. Like they would put the effort in. And then there's like minor environmental modifiers, and like some of them are like they're like literally environment skills where some like an enemy will place that and that will like change the parameters a little bit. Like there was one where it like limited you couldn't use a skill if it was like less than 2 points, so that like stops you from spamming bullet of fire, which like I'm surprised they don't. I'm surprised they don't like have that more of the game. And then some of them are like stage conditions where there's one where it's like all your skills are double. I think that was the one you were playing in the VC a little bit ago. So it's like you want to go in with like lower cost skills, and like they're like I think they're the closest thing that a game like this could do is instead of trying to make like a human like replica, it's making all these weird gimmick modifiers and also like but making you consider like your actions a little bit more in a way that would like maybe not directly translate into the multiplayer but just make you more aware of like here are these conditions I'm thinking about, and here are like here's like maybe the flexibility I should take with me.
Yeah, I think when it's already when the nature of fighting a bot already captures so little of what is actually good about the game, then it should have been even more important to at least make the process like really fast and painless. And yeah, they didn't really do that exactly. And I think this is a sentiment we had on the first session already, and like I think it still bears repeating. Like a sequel would just go so hard. It's so easy to see this game kind of in a current modern format and just address all this low-hanging fruit. Yeah. I don't know if I have more interesting thoughts on that aspect. Does anyone maybe want to chime in on that?
I'm kind of well, I don't know if I'm surprised, but I mean the way this is done in a lot of modern card games. Well, the single player card game stuff has evolved to be like drafting because that's a lot easier to like build systems around that. So I'm kind of I don't know. It doesn't really surprise me because it's like 2004 and people definitely did like card drafting back then, but I feel like it's not as much of a thing as it is now. But like you can kind of imagine how it would be interesting if you had the more systems around just picking cards, I guess, and like trying to weigh the pros and cons, blah blah blah. Instead of just like you just buy them and then get them in your deck or whatever.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the way I got to chapter 3 in single player, I was like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah. Like I said, I do wanna get to the credits just for the little check mark on my gamer resume. But I think the single player is definitely not the reason to play. Like I think Alan, you were actually saying like in the pre-show that you tend to be like very charitable toward sort of weird, cool brackets Japanese games. And even you were like not that hot on the single player, right?
Yeah. And it's funny. We talked about this a bit in the Shenmue episode. The whole time I was like, am I only tolerating this because like I'm doing it like in the context of playing it with like the friends? Like we do this show, and so I'm more academically interested in what this game is doing, even when it is annoying me. Yeah, I think also like originality buys you a lot of sincerity, I guess. And so while it's like maybe we're being a little too tolerant of like as many annoyances, it's like we don't got to be hard on the one game that exists like this. I also like we're talking about like this context of like maybe don't go play this game for the single player. It kind of gets back at like why we started Beach Gen in the first place. Is like, man, I don't know. Okay, I did end up convincing 2 other people to play this, but I cannot imagine a group this large getting into Phantom Dust in 2023 without this context.
Yeah, I definitely cherish it for that. It's like, again, it's this weird duality of I see how fucking cool this game is. It's extremely obvious, but there's so much stuff actually genuinely like kind of making me roll my eyes, right? um, hmm. I think we covered most of our notes actually really well. Maybe the last thing I want to wrap up with is sort of Phantom Dust's place, or maybe how it speaks to the overall Xbox/Japan narrative, because that was an important aspect of that generation, and obviously of this game as well, specifically. And it's something that would haunt kind of the Xbox and Microsoft for many, many years. I mean, it seems like, I mean, their position now with Game Pass and all that, we're not gonna into that, but like it's sort of an interesting direction for that whole story. Um, I guess I just think it's so fascinating and so strange that Microsoft were clear, like on a surface level, you would say they were trying really hard to appeal to that market, and it's obvious why, because it was still so strong at that point. It feels like, okay, by the 360 era, they realized, okay, no, we can do our own thing. We can be kind of fine without Japan for the most part. And yeah, if you then look deeper, you know, again, like I said, okay, it seems like they tried really hard, but then it's so weird to set up this whole studio for just 2 games, right, and then not do anything past that. This is a very, very odd setup. Maybe Pang, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like half measures in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
right? Like, I would say their biggest third-party Japanese support was Sega, and it was at a time when Sega was not very popular in Japan, like rolling off the Dreamcast, which like did pretty decently in America, I would say, and then just had like no support in Japan. Like, they were not doing super hot over there. So you have all these, you know, great Sega games that are on Xbox, but well, okay, we can cover the bad ones later. But like, there's a lot of those games that like just no appeal to a Japanese audience, I don't think. And then you have something like this where it's like getting sort of like a auteur-ish director like Futsugi to handle this, I think was an inspired move, but also it's sort of like he said in interviews like there was no attempt here to like make like a big appealing game, right? It was something that he was very interested in and has sort of his like style all over it and his like particular like interest at that time. I mean, I guess the biggest thing here you can see as sort of an appeal to that market is like this release at a big time for these like card-based twists on older Japanese franchises, and you know PSO had one. There's Chain of Memories and Metal Gear Acid and all these different
That is
card
actually very
games.
weird.
Yeah, and so I think, but I don't get the sense that they made this as as an attempt to cash in on the trend. I think it's just because like TCGs were big at the time, and Futsuki was really into them. Is like I want to make my own. That's like sort of an eclectic, eccentric take on that, which is not a good way to like break into the market. I don't know. I mean, I think this game is cool. I'm glad it exists. If Microsoft wanted to make a big appeal to that crowd, they should have just fucking tried to make a big JRPG, which I guess they did on 360. 360 is when they were like, they got Sakaguchi in there, actually tried to make some big like 360 exclusive JRPGs. I don't think that went over particularly well either. But this early era of I don't know if like I think they sort of knew their appeals were more strongly on the American side, both in like the post GoldenEye like split screen era and the dawn of Xbox Live, and then also this conversions of PC games because of the built-in DirectX API compatibility. Like I don't I think they leaned into the right things for original Xbox and obviously for 360, which did very well, but like this and Magatama and the rest of their Japanese slate is very I'm glad that it's eclectic, but it's also it was maybe not a great attempt on like trying to expand in that region, especially against PS2 at the time, which is no one against PS2, unfortunately.
I think half measures is a great word in that context, because Again, you just keep questioning, okay, what exactly was the play, right? From Microsoft's perspective, right? Because they did bring Phantom Dust back, right? They really wanted to make this a thing. Clearly somebody saw that you could make this work somehow, and yeah, it sort of didn't. Yeah, I don't know.
This definitely has executive hobby horse like written all over it. Like you've got the one like vice president of whatever that's like in all of the meetings bringing this up, and all the other executives are just like okay, fuck it, fine. Throw a few mil over here. Like here, pork barrel this so that we fucking take care of you for a little bit and you stop whining about it. Which is cool, but
I think that's like literally what happened, because there's some video where there's like an Xbox guy and he's kind of at a loss for words because he's like marking out the game so much, and he's like, it's Phantom Dust, it's a card game, it's an action game, it's indescribable.
It's indescribable. I think. Does anyone have anything they still want to say? Get off their chest?
Yeah, I'll just throw out that obviously what we played was just basically the quick decks or whatever, and in the single player. In terms of playing this game at a like more competitive level, we don't really, so probably a lot of our commentary is not going to apply. But I think someone can link them. There's a website someone made that has like a ton of stuff about this game. And then there's the old Phantom Dusted archive.org stuff. And then there's, I think, a Discord server where you can, that's like all about the competitive scene and like setting up matches. The Discord fighter usual stuff.
Yeah, those are a good call.
So, yeah, if you want that, then that's probably where you want to be looking.
I think I'm glad we did this, because I think it is valuable to explore it from the angle of, okay, what is it like for the average person to, if they actually decide to play Phantom Dust now? Like, I feel like the game is sort of under-discussed and underexplored in that way, and I'm glad we did that. We didn't spoil the story or get into that, really. I don't know if there's deep thematic analysis to be made with Phantom Dust. It does strike me, as someone who has seen the big mid-game twist, right, as big anime goof. Yeah,
it's the Dark Souls thing where it's like when you complete the quest line, the character is in a different spot in the hub area, and you're really self-actualized.
Yeah, I still want to see the ending though. I still want to see what's up with that. So maybe we encourage you to give it a shot. I mean, again, the game is literally free on Xbox and PC. Like,
it has cross save.
Yeah. If your PC acts up, like you can.
Yeah, well, on PC you'll probably have to do something.
Yeah, we have to link all the troubleshooting pages.
Yeah, it's not that hard, I think, but you gotta do some stuff to like fix your NAT. Or
you got a PC game.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, if you have a PC and you're trying to play a game like this, you know the drill.
Again, like very low barrier to entry, and I don't know, like if you ever want to play Phantom Dust online, like maybe you're seeing like 9 people here who have some experience with it, whatever. I'm definitely, like I've said like a million times, but I'm definitely gonna stick with it for a little past this project. And I think we're all glad that we like gave it a little bit of a shot at least. Yeah,
that's cool.
Cool.
Honestly, like, and Shenmue is probably the most fun I had with like a beach gen game as we're wrapping up this like first year of it.
Same.
But I think I'm the most glad beach gen was here, so we got to play Phantom Dust. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what we got. That. Because I feel like I think I would have tried it myself eventually, right, on my own volition, because like I gotta get off the bucket list, and I would not have gotten it. Like I would have just like I've been like, what the fuck is this? And that's what Beach is for, baby. I hope you enjoyed, and goodbye. I look forward to future episodes. We already have some ideas cooking. Woo. Bye bye.
Can I say one thing?
Oh yeah,
fuck Nick Robinson.
None of us remembers anything. We live in this world we don't understand. with people without memories wandering around, with monsters roaming the surface and these strange particles. Look, it breaks. This dust becomes energy.
In place of lost memories, we gained a rare ability. We can change thought into power. We use the power, fighting for our memories.
You care about the woman in the photograph, don't you?
You've come here. Sometimes it's better to forget.
You'll know soon enough once you get your memory back. I'm going back to the lost me.
Well then, I have no choice but to kill you.
I didn't watch this video, but fuck him.
I was trying not to like get into it. Like that's the thing. There's so many resources fucking tied to it, and, like attached to this particular name, right? And I was just pretending it doesn't exist, and like he doesn't exist, and whatever. But thank you for saying that.
Even past everything he did, I was like, I should grab a copy of this game. I'm sure I've like seen it before and like just didn't end up buying it because I was like, well, this is multiplayer and I don't have my Xbox hooked up, so whatever. And then I just looked and it's like right when his video on this dropped, it spiked from like $10 to $100. Like, fuck this market. Fuck Nick Robinson. Fuck that McDonald's DS. He made a video on Phantom Dust last year, like the Xbox's forgotten masterpiece.
Was it like a? Was it like an actual good video or like a Thor high heels type like?
I don't know.
It was somewhere between.
No.
I wouldn't say he's like really a vibes guy. I think he's just a fucking sleaze. I'm still mad at him for the McDonald's.
What does he do?
video.
He just buys a bunch of copies of the game and then he makes a video and then he sells them or something.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
You just gave
he
me
just
such
sucks.
a good idea.
He's also a sex pest. That's
yes.
That's like the first.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I thought
Yeah,
everybody
that's a
knew.
bit of a
Yeah, that's the
problem.
big part.
I didn't know. I don't know this guy. I don't
Don't you don't need to know more than you do. Like
Okay.
I
Well,
think
fuck him for lying about
continue to
Monkey Ball
topic
too.
about it.
Yeah.
I hate him so much.
I hope.
Alright, my bad. I had to get that off
yeah,
my
I hope
chest.
we get clicks from all the gamer gators. You know, like that'd be so sick. I just want to read so many angry like comments. After the Spider-Man episode, after the Spider-Man episode where we sort of almost teetered on like reactionary commentary, right? Now we can be like radical leftists again. So balance is restored.
I'm a man of many dimensions.
Thank you so much for that, Pang.
But hey,
Prototype fortune.
all I have to say is that if anyone does complain about it, that does mean they made it to the end of the video. So
Yes, exactly.
Pang just basically said, "Still beat though." Like.
I must admit that I have been somewhat disappointed in the performance of the primary unit.
The secondary unit should be online soon. Necessary, the primary will be terminated.
We've had to endure much, you and I, but soon there will be order again. A new age. Aquinas spoke of the mythical city on the hill. Soon that city will be a reality, and we will be crowned its king.